Welcome back, listener, to another episode of CyberGPT Pulse podcast. So, in this episode, the focus has been from the discussion which I saw in various conferences, like the code moving at various speed. Global team is trying to collaborate across a time zone, and how attackers are targeting everything from pipeline to secret. So security needs to come in even faster. So how to stay ahead of the threats without slowing down the innovation. So that's the key. That's where ASPM, application security posture management, comes in. In this episode, we sat down with Joe Nicastro, CTO of Legit Security, to unpack how ASPM transform as AppSec from reactive firefighting to a proactive one. Designing a scale, helping to design a scalable security strategy. We uh, dive in the episode from starting from how and why visibility across the SDLC is a missing link in AppSec, and how ledger security might solve the problem for the enterprise. And then we moved on to seeing how the alert fatigue can be cut down or reduced, and focus can be done on where what really matters. That's the new development and new applications rolling out every week. Then also we have discussed a bit of secret detection beyond the source code, because credential can be hiding in everywhere or anywhere you never expect. So, and then another important point where the organization are very looking for a new solution that making CI/CD security effortless. So a development team doesn't feel blocked. So I think their security tools are really helpful in that, and they can really make the development team feel better. So, and finally, why not, and how we can miss that, the rise of Gen AI in application security as well as software development is introducing new risks. So certainly we discuss that. So whether you are a CISO, DevSecOps engineer, AppSec, or just a developer, you don't want to miss this conversation. The security isn't built in your SDLC, or it's already there. It's near maturity or on a higher maturity. You are already very interested in the conversation. So buckle up. This episode starts next. Welcome, listener, to another episode of CyberGPT Pulse podcast. So, we have been covering various topics from supply chain attack to cloud and misconfiguration. We have explored countless security challenges and solution as well to keep the audience as well as ourselves ahead. So today our focus will be application security landscape, which is ever evolving, getting complex. The global team been collaborating further for the code pushing. So the third threat seems like everywhere. So from vulnerable pipelines to exposed secrets, security needs to move much forward. So that's where ASPM, or Application Security Posture Management, comes in. And today we have joining with us is someone who knows exactly how to make things seamless. I'm thrilled to welcome Joe Nicastro, CTO of Legit Security, to help us unpack ASPM, break down the noise, and share how Legit Security is transforming the ways we can secure our software factories. So, Joe, it's great to have you here, and let's kick thing off with your journey in this space and what led you to focus on application security particularly.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I think it's a great topic. A little bit about my journey and how I got to where I'm at. So I started off in the GRC space, primarily helping organizations meet out a number of different compliances within their ERP systems and things like that. So SOC 2, ITAR, etc. And then from there, really got introduced in the application security world when I took a role at Veracode as one of their security program managers. And my role there was largely to help organizations build programs at whatever maturity they were at with Veracode's application security tools. After that, went to work for Sonatype, doing a very similar thing with their software composition analysis. And what I realized in working in both of those roles is while there's a very real need for application security tools, oftentimes people still struggled with actually building out an application security program that was effective, even when they had all of those tools, right? And so that's kind of what led me into the journey within application security posture management. I've had the opportunity to work for a number of companies in the application security posture management sector, and most recently have been working with Legit on this problem statement or this mission for about the last 2 years now.
Yes, that sounds great.
Uh,
So, go ahead.
yeah, that sounds great, Joe. To start, to begin with something fundamental. So, how does the design philosophy behind Legit Security, find, fix, prevent model, which intrigued? So, could you break it down for us and explain how it shapes your approach to application security?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think one of the things that we've seen within the application security world up until now, with the advent of application security posture management, is that find piece is something that I think we all do fairly well, right? All of these tools out there, whether it's SAST or DAST or SCA or any other application security tool, does a really good job at finding a number of vulnerabilities. The things that they don't typically do well is giving you an understanding of, what is the layout of your application portfolio? How are those applications created? And then secondarily, how do I go about actually remediating at scale or preventing a lot of these particular things from coming in, right? And so at Legit, we really have broken this down into really the three main areas of what we feel is necessary to build a successful application security program in that find, fix, and prevent, right? And so when we talk about find, largely what we mean by that is inventorying and correlating all of your overall SDLC and application portfolio. So what types of technologies make up the application, whether it's API, data models, different types of dependencies, different frameworks, external services that are being called, as well as things like mapping out the overall SDLC. How does code get from your source control management system into your production environment? And then what are all the build assets that it's actually touching along that overall particular SDLC, or what types of controls do you have in place, right? So that's really what we mean by the find perspective. And then when we talk about fixing, it's not just a matter of identifying whether or not you have particular vulnerabilities that should be fixed based on a CVSS score, but from our perspective, really giving all of the context behind that particular issue to help you understand which of those particular areas you should be fixing because they cause the most, risk to your overall organization, right? So instead of looking at something like a SQL injection and fixing that because it's got a CVSS score of 9, really taking in more context to understand, well, does that sit on, an API that's maybe exposing sensitive data? Does it sit on a high business impact application? Maybe is it touching a product that has some other compliance requirements, whether that's SOC 2 or SSDF or CISA or whatever that may be. And then lastly, the goal there is to really help prevent new vulnerabilities from coming in, right? We use the analogy of the leaky faucet, and really the idea is it's great to be able to remove some of that water from the sink that's building up or that existing security debt. debt. But if you don't actually stop the flow of vulnerabilities from coming in, then you're really just increasing that security debt, or racing against how fast you can fix things from that existing security debt pile, right? So the idea is really, how do we shut off or prevent a lot of these vulnerabilities from coming in, whether that's IDE plugins or using CLIs to find secrets before they're brought into the overall SCM, or again just finding ways to help developers understand where these particular issues are coming from before they actually get introduced into the application.
Like, you're 100% right on SAST and DAST, the focus on detecting vulnerabilities rather than providing detailed remediation steps. I 100% agree on with where SAST analyzes the source code's byte-coded binaries from the security issues, but typically highlights the vulnerable code without offering context-specific security issues. When coming to DAST, as you mentioned, like scans running application for vulnerability, but usually provide generic guidance, like input validation should be needed, which is more important rather than pinpointing exact fixes. So, I'm sorry. So building on that, so how does Legit differ from traditional AppSec tools that focus mainly on vulnerability detection?
Yeah, it's a really great question, right? So I think when we talk about existing application security tools, they're really looking at finding vulnerabilities in silos, right? So to your point, SAST is really just looking at the actual binaries of the code itself. What it doesn't understand is where that code is running. Is it in production-facing environments? Is it internet exposed? Does it touch sensitive data? Is it on an application that drives a good amount of the overall revenue for a business? Does it potentially touch other vulnerabilities that maybe could exacerbate that, right? And so this is really where having an ASPM tool like Legit comes into play and really helps organizations build out better programs, because we can ingest all of these different points, SAST, DAST, SCA, even things like CSPM findings or API findings. This gives us the ability to really start to correlate this information in a way that makes sense to not only security teams and developers, but also gives us a better way of prioritizing and deprioritizing particular issues, right? Again, like we talked about earlier, right, all SQL injections are not built equally or are not going to cause the same amount of risk, despite the fact that they may have that same CVSS score. Some might be touching sensitive data, some might be internet exposed, some might be introduced by a developer that isn't aware that they have mitigating controls elsewhere. So really having all of this information under one umbrella and all of this context allows security teams to start making better decisions earlier on, as well as start building better, more granular policies going forward, right? Where now we can start to say things like, I only really want to focus on this SQL injection if it's internet exposed, touching sensitive data in a high business impact application. Everything else, maybe we can, deprioritize so that we can focus on other things.
Yep. So I totally agree on that, and specifically from application security tools, I think Legit has a very specific model to handle vulnerability management. Let's to move just shift the focus on application security posture management, as you were saying that from CSPM and other specific tools. Now we are having a very cool kit, say ASPM. So one of the biggest challenge with application security has been always that actually seeing everywhere is that what exactly is happening in SDLC, as you have already pointed out. So how Legit Security gives teams to the crystal clear view or visibility from code to cloud, which can be said that as an improvement from CSPM or something like that, which exactly helps the developer instead of just making their head spin.
It's a really great point. So a couple things that I'll point out there, right? One, I think one of the areas that we help out with in the application security posture management area that really differentiates us is our depth and breadth in an understanding of the actual software factory itself, along with things like misconfigurations or vulnerabilities, right? So earlier, when we talked about application security tools, SAST, DAST, SCA, things like that, even the CSPM, most of those are really focused on either the production environment itself or the application itself, and where are the security risks within that. What I think has largely been missed over the last few years is what types of security concerns and vulnerabilities or misconfigurations do you have in that software factory that could allow for the different types of software supply chain attacks that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, right? And so this is one of the things that we do really, really well here at Legit, is not only identify and give visual graphics to, again, how does an application start from a source control management system? What types of build artifacts is it creating? Where are the build servers that it's touching? What artifact registries, etc. But then also interrogating those particular build assets for any type of security risk that, again, is typically not being seen by application or traditional application security tools, right? And then from there, we overlay all of that visibility and understanding of how that code actually gets from, again, a source control management system to the production environment, with all of the different types of vulnerability data that we're getting not only from the traditional application security tools, but then also the production environment, whether that's from a native integration that we're doing into something like Kubernetes or via pulling that information from a CSPM tool like Wiz, right? And it's with this correlation that gives us the ability to say, hey, not only do you have a secret that's been exposed that you should focus on, but this secret actually exposes some information on this particular Jenkins server, which also has a vulnerability and allows for somebody to potentially steal code or access that particular build asset for some other nefarious purpose, right? And so it's this understanding of the entire SDLC and software factory along with the vulnerability data that gives us a better understanding of saying, hey, across these 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 vulnerabilities, here's the 100 or 50 that you should really be focusing on because of the way that all of these come together and correlate amongst each other that actually exacerbates that risk.
Yeah, so I think I heard multiple things where I will just point it out specifically from CSPM. Your tool will help into integrating the visibility from CSPM and other CI tools, build factories, as well as it does help in vulnerability management as well to cut the chaos for the team, fixing and prioritizing the task for them. So is that just a summarize to that, I think?
That's a great summary. The only other thing that I would add there is, one of the things that we often see security teams struggle with is this idea of I have a vulnerability in my production environment that was alerted to me via a Wiz or a Palo or an Orca or something like that. And the manual effort that it typically takes to understand how that production artifact actually, got there and where in the code it needs to be fixed, right? And so this is the other area that we help out with, is that code to cloud correlation, where if Wiz is saying, hey, you have this container that has a vulnerability, we can then say, hey, this container is actually being built from this particular piece of code or this manifest file. Here's the area that you want to go fix it in code, and that will then feed into your production environment and fix it there as well. Which is something that we find developers and security teams really struggle with at this point, and where they're seeing a lot of the value in understanding how to go about remediating these particular issues.
Okay, so I think just unwrapping the further findings of Wiz or any CSPM even deeper than it does, and to identify the exact build of the container is one of the main advantage of using Legit Security. So
Exactly.
that's something great there, because from the CI/CD pipeline, it's kind of which is a heart of modern development. Let's be honest, it can be a security nightmare for if not rightly handled. And this seems like a secret sauce which helps to just to deep dive the security finding from other tool as well as ASPM of Legit Security. So that will actually help the team to further get the better result, get the better idea to how to rectify, how to manage the vulnerabilities. So from that perspective, how Legit Security helps in integrating integrating your tool to various pipeline without actually giving the tough task for the team to get the integration done rightly, and without slowing the team down for a longer period of time.
So this is another really helpful area that I think we're offering value to a lot of our existing customers and prospects that we're talking to, is is this idea that, typically when we talk to teams that are rolling out traditional application security teams, there's a lot of, to your point, a lot of pipeline orchestration, a lot of SLA and policy creation that needs to happen within those tools. Oftentimes you're doing that redundantly because maybe you have, a different SaaS tool than you have from your DAS tool or your SCA tool, et cetera. So you're having to repeat a lot of these processes, right? Where Legit comes to play is we can actually be a really good management control plane above and beyond those application security tools, so that now you're just using those as sensors, right? I can plug and play my particular SaaS, DAS, SCA, whatever those controls are appropriately, and then I can build all of my SLAs, all of my policies, all of my orchestration within Legit, which really makes all of those sensors completely agnostic and plug and play as you see fit, right? So now if I, want to go and rip out Black Duck for Sneak or something like that, I don't need to worry about redoing all of my policies, all my SLAs, all my workflows and orchestration piece, because all that's being done at the Legit control layer, right? Secondarily, because we're doing these integrations and understanding where these particular tool sets are rolled out, we really help a lot of organizations with both not only the tool rationalization, right? We often go into organizations and they realize, oh, I didn't know that I had 3 or 4 SCA, licenses or 3 or 4 different SCA tools or SaaS tools in my environment. How can I consolidate that down? But then secondarily, we can also start to show you where you might have gaps in those controls, right? Are there particular areas in your application portfolio where you're not running SAST and DAST and SCA, where you should be running those particular controls? And this is something that we can help out as well. So now you understand what that coverage looks like and where you might need to accentuate some of that coverage.
Right. Coming to switching gears a little bit here, how the sensitive credentials like practices recognize that secrets, API keys, like you mentioned, cloud credentials and database passwords. So don't just reside in source code, so they can easily end up in the Git history, which can build logs and collaboration tools like Confluence or Jira. So with so many potential exposure points we have right now, so considering all those traditional scanning methods fall short, so how does Legit intelligently tackle this challenge by going beyond source code to detect and secure secrets across an organization's entire environment?
Really great question, right? And it ties really well to our the earlier bones that we were talking about across our software factory capabilities, right? So one of the things that we realized early on is that a lot of the software supply chain attacks that have been happening over these last few years, almost every single one of them have started with some type of secrets exposure, right? Somebody's finding a secret, then they're using that secret to either move laterally or make changes into the overall software factory and mount these malicious attacks, right? We saw it with SolarWinds, we saw it with 3CX, we saw it with Code Cove. So it's a pattern here, and because of that pattern, we've actually devoted a lot of engineering resources and time on our side to not only being able to find secrets, to your point, in source code, Confluence, Wiki, ServiceNow, all of the overall areas that developers are in, but then also spent a lot of time really helping reduce the overall false positive count of those particular secrets, right? I think one of the biggest struggles that most organizations have with their overall secrets program is this, A, the sheer amount of secrets that they're finding, and then B, the ability to actually drill down through those secrets to understand which of them are real versus which of them are maybe, just a test variable that's thrown in there or something like that. So from our perspective, we're looking at a couple of things to add additional context. We're looking at things like the validity of the secret, right? Is that secret something that we can bounce against a known API and get a good response back for? And if so, then that's probably something that you should prioritize. We're also looking at things like, where is that particular secret found? Is it in a test file versus maybe a production file? Is it something that's being utilized for cloud credentials versus maybe something that's being utilized for an internal connection behind the scenes, right? So there's a number of different things that we're looking at on our side to not only find secrets, but then also help you understand which of those secrets that we're finding should actually be looked at from a risk perspective and corrected or remediated.
Right. So as it's like for the false positives which can drain security resources, so it's like smoke alarm going off every time you make toast. So annoying and not very helpful. So, how does your AI powered engine cut through the noise and reduce false positives and ensure security team focus on real threats instead of chasing harmless breadcrumbs?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think this is one of the areas that AI really shines through, right? I think there's a lot of organizations that have tried to use AI for a number of different things. I think one of the early on things that AI does really well is sorts through large sets of data to make correlations and be able to find signal from the noise, right? And so from that perspective, we've actually trained our own internal LLM on a lot of research data that we've gotten from colleges and organizations on things like secrets, what makes a secret, what makes a false positive for a secret, etc. And then from our perspective, when we do see secrets, we're not necessarily sending the secret to our LLM, but we're sending all of the additional context. What is the file name that particular secret was found in? What are the lines of code before and after that particular secret? How risky is the actual application, etc. And then we use all of that information within the LLM to identify potential false positives. We've actually rolled this out to a number of our customers, one of which who's actually found that our false positive ratio right now is reducing their false positives by about 98%, and has actually allowed them to go through and put in a policy of 0 secrets allowed in their overall environment altogether. And because of the high accuracy of our false positive rating, they're basically going and closing all of those false positives automatically in the background and only focusing on the secrets that have not been labeled as a false positive.
So, just shifting a bit to real world challenges, which maybe Legit is planning or is already addressing. So, in organizations, the developers are actually pushing code at lightning speed right now. So, keeping track of these repos, every dependencies, as well as the potential vulnerabilities is kind of like chasing shadows. So, what are the biggest challenge your organization in terms of your understanding faces when securing their application, especially large distributed teams, and how Legit does cut through this complexity to help them?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think there's 3 things that we hear from most organizations the most. The first is, I've got so many vulnerabilities that I don't know where to focus first. And what ends up happening is most of my developers are not fixing anything because they don't know where to put those efforts, right? So from that perspective, we're doing a lot on our side to not only help with the prioritization issue, what should you be fixing first and why, and giving all of that context to the developers, right? It's internet exposed, touches sensitive data, falls under some kind of compliance, touches another vulnerability that exacerbates, etc. But secondarily, we're also showing where can you deprioritize things, right? Which helps developers go back to their bosses and say, hey, I didn't fix these things, and here's the reason why I didn't fix these things. Here's the deprioritization list, which allows them to now focus on other areas, right? It also gives security teams the ability to go and have those higher level executive conversations on, hey, I didn't fix this, and it's not a real risk, and here's all the reasons why, right? So I think that's one of the areas that we're heavily focusing on. Secondarily, the other thing that we hear is really, I don't know what pipelines I have. I don't know what controls I have on those pipelines. I don't know where code is originating from. And again, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with that overall find perspective, where we're now mapping all of that out. And it gives us the ability to understand, where are these particular issues coming from? How focused should we be on them? As well as an understanding of how do I implement better controls within my program to increase my overall maturity, right? And then the last thing that we hear quite a bit is, well, that's great. Now that I know what I need to fix and I know where it needs to be fixed, who do I assign that to, right? And I think this is the other bigger issue that security teams struggle with is, I now need to fix this. Who do I dole this particular issue out? What developer, what DevOps person, what team lead, etc. And this is something that we can also help out with through issue identification, right? We can actually look at the commits and understand that, hey, this particular vulnerability or this particular misconfiguration was actually brought in by developer A. And so now we can start to automate that orchestration and say, hey, if I see this particular issue and I want to get it fixed, I know that I can send it directly to the developer that created this issue without any kind of manual intervention.
So that sounds like Legit Security is actually applying the AWS share model in share responsibility model in SaaS and application security as well, where security is actually sharing responsibility of giving easier mode to developers to handle as well as plug those vulnerabilities and to just make their life easier. So from perspective, as we have earlier also taken the name of Gen AI. So Gen AI is always a very interesting topic nowadays. So coming back to that, Gen AI is actually transforming the development workflow as well. So as with the LLM coming around everywhere, but it actually introduced new risks. So does Ledger Security manage? How does the Ledger Security manage Gen AI risk within the development environment? And do you want to share anything on that?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, to your point, Gen AI is everywhere. It's something that we're seeing developers utilize very heavily, and it's a good thing, right? It's making them substantially faster, more innovative, et cetera. But it does come with its own set of risks, right? And so I think this is largely what we were talking about earlier, where we're able to combine risks to show where you should be focusing efforts to pay attention to things, right? And so to that aspect, a couple of things that we'll do, we can actually identify all of the collaborators that you have in your environment that have access to generative AI tools, right? Are they using Copilot or some other type of generative AI tool? This is something that we can easily filter for and give you a list of, hey, here's the developers that are using those things. Secondarily, we actually do interrogate all of the usage of generative AI and LLMs within the application, right? So we can start to show you things like, hey, this particular application is making external calls to, ChatGPT, or it's using Hugging Face, or it's using, some other SageMaker, Airflow, whatever that may be. So now you understand where you might have those risks and what additional controls you need to put in place. And then lastly, we can then combine all of this context to make some very, very granular queries to identify where there's real risks. So for instance, a developer that's utilizing generative AI isn't necessarily risky in and of itself. But if I have a developer that's using generative AI inside of a branch that doesn't have code review and doesn't have some kind of human intervention to look at that code as it's coming in to validate that it doesn't fall under a license or have some vulnerability or something like that, that is an additional risk for me, right? And so this is where we kind of come into play, where we can start to stack those risks together and say, hey, show me all of my collaborators that are utilizing generative AI tools inside of a pipeline where we're missing code review, missing some other level of controls, and now I can get a little bit more granularity and more visibility to focusing on what's actually coming in from that set of developers.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. With GenAI revolutionizing development, security risk and multiplying faster than unread Slack messages. So while managing these risks is crucial, no developer wants security to feel like a bouncer slowing down the party. So how does Legit ensure enterprise grade security without without making developers feel like they need a permission slip just to push code? So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of thoughts on that. One, I think, the idea of having all of the additional context give your developer substantially more skin in the game, right? I think at the end of the day, one of the things that I see the most pushback of is telling a developer, hey, you need to slow down on the other KPIs that you're working on to fix this security issue. And they say, why? And you say, well, because it's a CVSS score of 9. And that means nothing to a developer, right? However, if you start to frame it in the fact that, hey, it's not a security issue, it's a quality issue. And the reason why it's a quality issue is because this particular vulnerability or this particular weakness also exposes sensitive data. It allows for somebody to get into your application, allows for somebody to get into your overall software factory and make changes. These are things that developers understand, right? I've never met a developer that wanted to build bad code or insecure code. I do, however, meet developers that are moving very fast, and if they're not given all of the context on why it's important, may overlook that importance because, again, they just don't understand, or they're being inundated with so many vulnerabilities that, again, when everything everything's a priority, nothing is a priority, right? So I think twofold. One, giving them that context, and then secondarily, you're actually slowing down the amount of things that you're bringing to the developer, because now you're able to set up substantially more granular policies, right? I don't need to send every SQL injection to my developers. I only need to send the ones to them that have a very real risk impact to my overall organization, right? And this slowdown of vulnerabilities that we're sending to them, or opening up of JIRA tickets, will also allow them to focus and understand, if I'm seeing this, it's a real problem to the organization, because I know that they've already vetted this out.
That's actually a very excellent point which you have made, Joe. Actually, sending out the specific filtered, vetted vulnerabilities to the product team is the one thing which a security team should be doing much better, to make the engineering team or product team better planning for handling those in their own, as a KPI, because we let's be frank, developer team are already very hard pressed from various requests coming around from test team and other safety teams, so they are just looking to get rid of security requests if they don't have much resources. So this should be the responsibility for security team to handle it much better. So just yeah, so just focusing on future of application security now, and just now based on your expertise, what is your advice to particular CISOs who are struggling to operationalize security beyond the compliance checklist, and seeing in mind in next 3 5 years you are seeing changes coming around in application security, maybe because of GenAI, maybe quantum gets mature finally. So what will be your advice there?
Yeah, so a couple things there. One, I think the first thing that would really help CISOs in their overall application security maturity would be get rid of the idea of inbox zero, right? I still meet with a lot of CISOs who have this philosophy of, I need no vulnerabilities in my application, and therefore we're going to always have a zero is what we're aiming for, and it's just not realistic, right? Most teams don't have enough security people to go and actually get to inbox zero. You definitely don't want your developers working on inbox zero, because now they're not working on KPIs or feature set that's going to actually drive you in your business and make you more competitive. And secondarily, you're potentially working on and putting effort in fixing things that don't actually offer real risk to the business, right? And so I think having the mind frame shift from a CISO in their application security program from inbox zero to more of a risk-based approach will not only allow them to build better programs, but will actually start to reduce risk within their overall program substantially faster than this idea of, hey, we're going to fix everything or stop production anytime that we see a vulnerability come in that maybe doesn't offer risk, right? Secondarily, I would say, one of the things that I do potentially see coming in the future is more of a combination of ASPM, CSPM. We already starting to see this blurred line between cloud native applications and where those vulnerabilities are and how those vulnerabilities come together with correlation or context. So I do potentially see these two things coming together in more of like a CNAP type play, where again your posture management on both the cloud side and the application side are going to be very cohesive. And then to your point with regards to AI, I think as AI continues to advance, it'll be nice to be able to utilize that for a lot more of the correlation context piece, right? Things like actually doing attack mapping and then potentially showing, where you have the most probable attack coming from. Therefore, we can start to use that for prioritization capability as well, right? Again, I think AI is really good at taking large data sets and looking through those large data sets to find some form of correlation or signal. And I think this is really the number one thing that we need to do within the application security posture management space in order to make a lot of sense out of all of the data that we're getting.
Well, so now that we have approached the closing of the session, so thank you all for those incredible insights, Joe. So you have certainly given us a lot to think about, especially how Legit is changing the security game for developers. So before we wrap up, so where can our listeners learn more about Legit Security or even get a demo of the platform? We don't want them to miss out on securing their code while sipping a coffee in a peace.
Well, yeah, if you're interested in hearing more information, I would definitely suggest you take a look at our website, legitsecurity.com. There's lots of good information on not only the solution itself, but also some case studies on what we're doing with existing customers, as well as some additional blogs on things that we're seeing coming from both CISA attestation, SSDF, the CRA. So there's a lot of information there as well. And then if you're interested in a demo, by all means, there's actually a demo fill out form on the website, or feel free to reach out to myself or somebody else from Legit. We'd love to get that set up.
Perfect. Like besides everything, like technical standpoints, and how do you would like to spend your free time besides helping Legit Security legitly?
It's a great question. So when I'm not working on application security programs, I have a number of hobbies. I travel quite often. As a matter of fact, I'll be in Mexico in March. So I like to go and visit new places and meet new people. I'm also a pretty avid photography person, as you can see via all the photography gear on my back shelf. And then I have a bunch of fish that kind of keep me occupied as well. There's a number of fish tanks in the house that are constantly needing some kind of cleaning or maintenance or something like that in order to stay pretty.
Well, perfect then. So, well, before
Yeah. Sorry,
before we wrap up, so don't.
that seems like a very busy day for handling some fishes as well as your favorite hobbies there. So just for listeners, the demo as well as the other link of Legit Security will be in show notes, which you can find out in this podcast.
Perfect.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate all the time. It was a great conversation.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in. And this is another episode of Cyber GPT Pulse podcast. Stay secure, stay informed, and we will catch you in the next episode.